Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Roithmeier, and I have the privilege and the honor of serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation. And I also have the incredible pleasure to welcome you to this second annual Hope on the Horizon Palm Beach Luncheon, sold out for the second year in a row with a 30% increase over last year. Now, people ask, what are the ingredients of such a successful luncheon? And I tell them, you have two brilliant co-chairs. We have a brilliant founder, Mr. Leonard Lauder. We have a brilliant founding scientist, Dr. Howard Phillip. And we have an incredible honoree, Marci Gay Harden. It is my pleasure now to bring up one of our two co-chairs, and this is a true story. I started for this wonderful organization as its CEO January 1st, 2017. On January 2nd, 2017, I received a phone call that said, "You will do a luncheon in Palm Beach." Ladies and gentlemen, I give you one of our two wonderful co-chairs, Jan Willinger.
Thank you, Mark, but it wasn't quite that easy. It took years, but I look around this room and I could almost cry. It is so wonderful to see this crowd. And it's truly my pleasure to have my wonderful friend Nancy as a co-chair. She has been a leader in this. We're thrilled at the response of our first event, but more thrilled to see even more interest and enthusiasm and support for this cause. In a few minutes, you will learn some of the latest advances in research. The ADDF researchers and scientists are laser focused in their work on finding a cure for Alzheimer's and the causes. And every dollar that we donate goes directly to research. So the battle for Alzheimer's continues. In working together, we can and will end this disease and allow millions of people to age with their minds and their dignity intact. So I thank you.
The theme today is hope. You're going to hear a lot of statistics, and many of you have heard a lot of statistics that are grim statistics of who has dementia, who has Alzheimer's, and as baby boomers age, that's getting more and more. And I think we've all heard in the popular press about failures that have gone on in drug discovery for Alzheimer's. But today is going to be nothing but hope, because you see, 20 years ago, when Leonard and Ronald Lauder founded ADDF, they had a vision that they'd started investing in startups and biotech, something called venture philanthropy, so that we could get a decade or two down the road to where we are today. In the next 3 to 5 years, the breakthroughs, the new treatments are coming, and you're going to hear all about that today. How many folks were here at last year's event? Just a quick show of hands. Okay. I've been asked by several people, what's new since last year? And you're going to hear about that today, but probably the biggest thing is there's a philanthropist that many of you know. His name is Mr. Bill Gates. And he announced a year ago that his father was 94 and he was with Alzheimer's, his father. And then Bill Gates went on a journey. He wanted to look for a partner, a leader, these are his words, not ours, a partner and a leader who was an innovator, who was a disruptor, who were leaders, who he could partner with and make a difference. And you're going to hear more about this today, but Bill Gates made a very significant investment in ADDF. And it's a $50 million project, and you're going to hear more about it today. But when Bill Gates looked all over the world to who to partner with, he chose ADDF. Now I'm getting ahead, I know we're in Florida, but I'm getting ahead of my ski tips. So I want to turn this over now to our wonderful MC. He was with us last year where he served as our magnificent auctioneer. You all know him as Mr. Tom Quick. He's a retired vice chairman of Quick and Riley. We also know him here locally for all of the causes that he gets behind. In addition to ADDF, he serves for the various nonprofit groups, including the Partnership for Inner City Education, the Hospice of Palm Beach County, the Zoological Society of Palm Beaches, and the Best Buddies International Florida, and the American Friends of the V&A Museum. Mr. Tom Quick.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon. And it certainly is what a great treat to be here in this room to see it almost double in size from the Club Colette. So we're sorry, Danny, that we're not at your club today, but the good news is because you couldn't accommodate this fabulous group of people who are supporting this super wealth charity. Thank you, Mark, and welcome. I am honored to be with you today as the host for the second annual Palm Beach Luncheon, Hope on the Horizon. On behalf of the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation and its founders, Leonard and Ronald Lauder, I welcome you all here today. We have the pleasure of having my dear friends, Leonard and Judy, here with us, and thank you again for everything that you've done. Judy being right there alongside Leonard on this wonderful adventure that he has undertaken with his brother. And you're such a great asset to him. So thank you for being here, Judy. I'm delighted to be hosting the program this year and playing a part in helping ADDF achieve its mission, is to find a cure for Alzheimer's. On behalf of ADDF, we want to thank again Nancy and Jan. Their commitment to bring the Palm Beach community together to support the ADDF and this cause is both admirable and amazing. So thank you again. 20 years ago, Leonard and his brother Ronald had a clear, singular vision when they started this foundation to close in on a cure for Alzheimer's. We're grateful for the vision, the leadership of our founders to make this all happen. ADDF is dedicated to finding drugs to prevent and treat Alzheimer's. When you donate to ADDF, every single dollar, 100%, goes to drug research. All the expenses, any other costs associated with running this charity are underwritten by the Lauders. It's amazing. To achieve their goal, ADDF knew it would take a different approach, one that would encourage innovation, one that would take on ideas that others would not. Shortly, we will learn about the best and the brightest ideas when I have the pleasure of moderating a panel discussion with Dr. Phillip and Dr. Gallagher. And I would be remiss if I did not tell you that, you can participate again because there's a silent auction and there will be a few items at the live auction. I hope you've had a chance to look through the silent auction items on your way in. There's also an insert at the tables that we invite you to fill in to make this even more of a success than it is as I stand here at this moment. We have the cards, and I think you all know, at the tables. So please fill them out and make Leonard and Ronald and Judy happier. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend, the man who makes the important work of ADDF possible. ADDF's co-founder and co-chairman, Leonard Lauder. Leonard?
Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Tom, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. And thank you also for introducing my dear wife, Judy, except I'm the camp follower. I follow her because she's on a speaking tour now. I'm glad to get a glance of her. Hi, Judy. And I want to, I'm going to introduce you first for a moment to Marci Gay Harden, who is an actress, and she has written a wonderful book called My Seasons of My Mother, a memoir of love, family, and flowers. And so that you'll hear more from her later on. Now, let me dive in really fast, okay? We're here to do one thing only, to find a cure for Alzheimer's. That's what we do. And we today are the largest foundation in the nation, if not in the world, devoted to this. And when I first got into this business, as you say, not into lipsticks, into this, there's a difference, by the way, that it turned out that every time there was someone who had Alzheimer's, there was always a doctor who said, give me some money and I'll cure it. My aunt, my mother's sister, had Alzheimer's. And so I went to her doctor. He said, give me $1 million and I'll cure Alzheimer's. Firstly, I gave him the $1 million, never got a thank you note, and they did nothing. I never heard from them again. The nation is full of people who says, give me $1 million and I'll cure it. What we do is focus just on cure. Now, you're going to hear more from Dr. Howard Felix in a few minutes, but a couple of things about what we're doing. How many of you are from New York City? Many? Some. Okay. So you've heard of Weill Cornell. We are their partner with working on what I consider a great new discovery, not a great new event or a project. It's not a discovery yet. Because if you hear very often that people who have the Alzheimer's gene, which is ApoE6. However, we're working on something now where if we can inject and mix in with that in gene therapy to bring an ApoE2, we can then make it be a good gene. Now, I've had friends who have had their gene test and they said, well, I don't even want to have a gene test, really, she said, because if I do, I know there's nothing I can do. We are going to find the thing to do if you have the gene, it will be a better gene and normal gene. And we're the only funder, along with some of our board members and Weill Cornell. That's what we're doing. Now, the other thing that Howard will tell you a little bit about is that 60% of the women in the world are the ones prone for Alzheimer's. 60%, not men. 40% for men, 60% for women. Dr. Roberta Britton, who's a member of our board, she lives in Arizona, Howard, right? Is working on a new project where we are going to try to change the structure of our hormones, of women's hormones, to make it to make them not prone to the disease. Now, we're the only ones who do this thing. Most of the people put money into care and et cetera. We do drug discovery. That's what we do. And the reason that both Ronald and I and our families are the ones who pay all the overhead is that my grandmother had it, my aunt had it, my mother had it, so many of our family members have had it, and we will make sure that no one here will have it, or no one will have their family that they know we have the gene, but there's nothing we can do about it. Because we are going to get this done during my lifetime. I've got another 45 years yet to go. All right, I'll take 10. But that's what we do, and that is why I am so passionate about doing what I do, because my wife Judy said to me, look, on my birthday, what is it that you really want to do? I gave her 2 little words: cure Alzheimer's. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I haven't read my notes. What am I supposed to do now, Mark?
I'm going to thank you for being up here and for everything that you do. As a great friend and someone who really loves...
And it's over?
No, I'm going to introduce Dr. Howard Phillip.
As you can see, we get along very, very well.
Great friend.
Thanks. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. Thank you for your support. Thank you for coming. We are going to cure this disease. I promise you that. Otherwise, you get your money back. Fair enough? Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. Okay, as I mentioned before, we will hear from some of the best and the brightest scientists. First, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Howard Fellett, who has led the ADDF since its founding in 1998. Dr. Fellett is an internationally recognized physician-scientist and a leading expert in Alzheimer's disease. He's a clinical professor of geriatric medicine and palliative care medicine and neuroscience at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City. He's written more than 300 scientific publications, including one he recently co-authored with other ADDF scientists on novel approaches beyond the common amyloid that could slow or prevent Alzheimer's. As a geriatrician, he has cared for patients suffering from this disease as a neuroscientist. He has led the way to explore new frontiers in Alzheimer's research. And I will note that on a personal level, it was Dr. Fellett that came out to our home on Long Island after I made a phone call to Leonard in 2006 and said something was wrong with my mother and the way she was acting. And it turns out that within 3 hours of Dr. Fellett spending the morning with my mother, he came back and told us that she was basically diagnosed at the level 3-4 level of Alzheimer's, which we did not even appreciate because she was able to fake so many things that she did through routine procedures that she used to live by. So we are very, very appreciative and we are very thankful for Howard. As I know so many of you here in this room, he's an outstanding, wonderful humanitarian, and it's my great pleasure to introduce him. Howard?
Thank you so much, Tom. I want to thank everybody here for joining us for our second Palm Beach Luncheon. We really appreciate it. And I just want to say at the outset that we could do none of this without your help. So I want to thank all of you for working with us to find effective and safe new treatments for Alzheimer's disease. I want to thank Nancy and Jan for helping to organizing this and conceiving of it, and all their hard dedication to our work as well. I first saw my first patient with Alzheimer's disease in 1980. Up to that point, I had been practicing and gone to medical school, and I never heard of the disease. On the day that I saw about 300 people in a building out on Long Island that were, basically warehoused with the disease, I decided to sort of dedicate my life to trying to find a treatment and taking care of people. And I've been doing this for 40 years. So basically, this is my professional life, is caring for people with Alzheimer's, including my own dad, and doing research on Alzheimer's. And so I feel really kind of, I don't want to say qualified, but I feel that I can give us a perspective on where we are. And I will tell you with great certainty that I have tremendous optimism and hope. As Mark mentioned, we've heard a lot about the failures. We don't have drugs. But I can tell you that starting from nothing in 1980, when I started in the field, we knew nothing about Alzheimer's disease. We hardly knew how to diagnose this. We had no treatments. We had no diagnostic tests. We knew nothing about prevention. We were starting from scratch. And to put that in perspective, cancer research started around 1900. We had diabetes drugs in the 1920s. We had hypertension drugs in the 1930s. Cancer today is pretty much a manageable disease for most people. We're set back in time. We're staggered, and there are historical reasons for that, which I won't go into today. But we're right at the right time now to be investing in new drugs. The awareness now is incredible. Back when I started, nobody heard of Alzheimer's. They'd ask me what I do, and I'd say I work on Alzheimer's disease, and they'd look at me sort of cross-eyed and say, Old-timers disease? I never heard of Old-timers disease. Now today, we have people like Marci Gay Harden and others who have brought to national attention the disease, and it's on all of our lips, and we're all aware of it, and we've seen it up close and personal. Back then, there was no awareness. So times have changed tremendously. So let me tell you why I'm so optimistic and where we are today and what I think the near future is. First of all, there have been billions of dollars invested in basic research. So just as a soundbite, let me just say that we have really telescoped our work in basic research as a nation and as throughout the world. And I think I can stand here today and say to you that I think we know as much about how Alzheimer's disease happens as we know about cancer and heart disease, okay? But because of that staggered time that I mentioned, we haven't had the chance to translate that knowledge into new drugs yet. But that's exactly what we're doing. So we know as much about it, and we can take all that knowledge in basic science that's been learned, and we can start to translate that. That's what the ADDF has been doing for 20 years, is translating the knowledge that was being developed in basic science into new drugs. That's how we got into it. Diagnostics are critically important for research and care in any disease, as you know. Cholesterol, the discovery of cholesterol as a risk factor for heart disease was revolutionary in research on heart disease. It led to the first statins 35 years after cholesterol was discovered as a risk factor for heart disease. That's where we are today. ADDF, 20 years ago, started supporting the development of the first diagnostic test for Alzheimer's disease. And long story short, that test was approved by the FDA in 2012. It was the first diagnostic test. It's a brain scan where you just bring the patient into the radiology office, you give them an injection of a very small amount of a dye, it goes into the brain, and it binds the plaques that Alzheimer saw in a 52-year-old woman in 1906. This test has been called revolutionary by people in the field. Why is it revolutionary? Because it enabled three things. First of all, if I see a patient that has some mild memory loss and I'm not sure what's going on, I can write a simple prescription. They go over to the radiology office, and within a couple of hours, I can tell them with 98% certainty what they have. That's amazing. That is amazing, okay? That's the first thing. It can change clinical care. Number two, it's completely changed the way we do clinical trials for the development of drugs. Lilly was the company that bought this test for $800 million in 2010. Why did Lilly buy the test? Because they were doing trials trying to remove amyloid from the brain of patients with Alzheimer's to get rid of those plaques. But they didn't know if the people who were entered into these trials, which cost billions of dollars, actually had Alzheimer's. So they took the test during the time of the trial, and they tested these people in the trial, and guess what? They found out that 35% of the people in the trial didn't have Alzheimer's disease. The test was negative, and they didn't even have the target of the drug. So of course that trial was going to fail because it wasn't being done properly. Today, almost any trial that's done, especially in phase 3 by a biotech company, will use some sort of either a spinal fluid test or these PET imaging exams, these neuroimaging exams, to make sure that everyone that goes into the trial, 100% of the people, actually have Alzheimer's disease. It's revolutionized the way we do clinical trials. It's made them much more precise and much more reliable. And recently, drugs that Biogen, for example, is developing showed that they could remove in 80% of the people at 18 months all of the plaques in their brain using the test, because the test is used as a biomarker in the clinical trials to see if the drug is working. So Biogen's drug actually worked. It did what it was supposed to do. It removed the plaques from the brain. And then your next question is, well, did the people get better? And there was a hint, because this was a small phase 1b trial, but there was a hint that the people were getting better. And as a result of that, the way that the test, the biomarker, accelerated the clinical trial program is that Biogen then went from a maybe $50 or $75 million phase 1b study to a $3.2 billion phase 3 program, and that telescoped the amount of time it takes to get this drug to market if it works by about 3 or 4 years. And that's a big deal. And the last thing that this test did was enable prevention, because we started testing people in their 60s, in their 50s, in their 40s, and we found out that Alzheimer's disease, while clinically people get demented average age of 75, the disease starts in your 40s and 50s. And so that's enabled prevention trials. And today there are large prevention trials with these drugs to see if we can prevent Alzheimer's. Now the thing is, the test costs $3,000 to $5,000 depending on who's doing it, and it takes time. What we need in our field is a blood test. Now this is a huge challenge, but that's why we started the Diagnostics Accelerator with Bill Gates, Charles Schwab, David Dolby, the Fidelity family, and most recently, we haven't announced it yet, but some other very prominent investors. And the purpose of this $50 million program is to develop a blood test for Alzheimer's. That will further revolutionize the field. It'll build on the way the brain scan works. It'll be much cheaper. People will be able to go to the doctor, just like you can get a cholesterol, and get a blood test. Not only that, but we're going to need a lot of different kinds of blood tests because the causes of Alzheimer's disease are many. Inflammation, genetics, so on. And so we're going to need a lot of different blood tests. And one of the other things we're going to do is we're going to work with digital technologies to enable better lives for people and better data collection in these clinical trials. So biomarkers are really going to be important. Let me tell you another reason why I'm so excited about where we are today after 40 years. There are over 120 drugs in clinical trials today for Alzheimer's disease. Now, are we behind cancer? There's about 3,500 drugs in clinical trials today for cancer. But to go from zero, literally zero, to 120 today is amazing. 120 drugs. About half of those drugs are going towards amyloid. We're not funding any of that. We're funding novel mechanisms, as I mentioned, inflammation, genetics, neuronal energy failure, vascular disease in the brain. We're funding we're seed funding novel programs with novel drugs to develop for Alzheimer's disease. 2/3 of the drugs that we're testing are in phase 2. This is the phase in the drug development pipeline where drugs are first tested for whether or not they work. And that's really exciting. And half the drugs that we're testing are in a phase of the disease, in a clinical phase of the disease called mild cognitive impairment. And this is a phase where people first become clinically symptomatic, where it's apparent to loved ones, to spouses, to children, and even to the doctor. But people are still functional at that stage. They can still function. And what we want to do is use this paradigm of treating MCI, mild cognitive impairment, to see if we can slow it down or stop it so that people won't go to the next phase, which is dementia. And over half the trials that we're currently funding are in that space of MCI to prevent MCI, mild cognitive impairment, from going to dementia. We're also in a phase which we could talk about in the conversation. We think we know how to prevent Alzheimer's using lifestyle. And the soundbite I'll give you, and we can discuss it more later, is that everything you know about to prevent heart disease is good for your brain. And we have data now from clinical trials that shows that if you lead a healthy lifestyle, if you exercise regularly, if you don't smoke and drink alcohol, that you can delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease. And this is really important because the modeling of this number is that if we can delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease by 5 years, we would reduce the number of cases by half, 50%. Because think about it, the average age of onset is 75. The average age of death is about 80. And as Mark said, our goal is not necessarily the extension of life, but it's the extension of quality of life. It's my great privilege that summary, and I think you can see why I'm optimistic. We have diagnostic tests. We have tests we can use in clinical trials to make clinical trials better. We have 120 drugs in clinical trials today. We know about prevention. And I think we're going to have new drugs to market in 3 to 5 years that are going to just break open the whole field. Dr. Michela Gallagher, who's our guest scientist today, is somebody I've known for many years, I would say. And we're especially privileged for Michela to be here today with us. Michela, ADDF's been supporting Michela since 2010. Michela spun out a biotech company and became a entrepreneur in 2008, and we helped to fund and made an investment in her biotech company. Michela is the Krieger Eisenhower Professor of Psychological and Brain Science and heads the Neurogenetics and Behavior Center at Johns Hopkins, while also being the CEO of her biotech company, AgeneBio. We've given her about $2.8 million in funding over the years, and her company is out of 10 drugs that are currently in phase 3 in the world. Her company's drug is the only drug in phase 3 right now that's not an anti-amyloid drug. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Michela Gallagher. Thank you.
Wow. First of all, I just really want to say, as heartfelt as possible, that I am so grateful to the ADDF. As Howard mentioned, I'm an academic scientist, and when I made, my group made some discoveries that we thought were very important, they were out of the mainstream. And the mainstream at the time was amyloid, with a lot of different, in the field, different routes or drugs, different approaches to amyloid. And it was kind of hard to get, the oxygen in the room for something that was not amyloid at that time. But then, as now, the ADDF has been really far-sighted, at least from my point of view. I wouldn't be standing here today, I really think, if it weren't for Howard Phillott and the organization in those early days. The door was open, and we were able to walk through. There was another challenge then, too. So Howard was taking us back to 2010, 2012, and what we were doing was the basis for an approach or therapy to delay, maybe even prevent dementia. So you would start early when people did not have a clinical diagnosis of dementia and try to keep that from happening. And at that time, there was no FDA regulatory pathway for doing that kind of trial. So they couldn't tell you how you needed to design it or what measure you would use to show that you were really having a therapeutic efficacy. And so that was pretty challenging too, although the field now has very much gravitated. We aren't forgetting about people who are in the phases of dementia, but we know somewhere in the future we want to eliminate this disease. It just will not occur. That's the real goal, and I agree with Leonard entirely on that. We are at sort of a little bit of a half stage in doing that. But it was very much some funding to the company I founded from the Program to Accelerate Clinical Trials here at ADDF. Changes in the field. So scientifically, the field is really catching up with us, and so the approach that we're using is very well grounded. And then we had some exceptionally effective meetings with the FDA along the way, and they agree now on the way to design this trial. And as Howard mentioned, we are enrolling patients. This is a phase 3 ongoing trial. And in addition to that, because of the drug, and I'm not going to talk a lot about technicalities today, and the FDA's no concerns about safety with our approach, we could register on a single phase 3. So it's it's a shortcut program relative to some of the new molecules that we need to be very, very careful about because we don't know what they're going to happen to people in the long term. So I just want to give you a bit, nothing too technical about our trial. Howard mentioned that a lot of these treatments now are going into people who are in a transitional phase, and it really lasts more than a decade, or at least a decade, between normal aging and when a physician who knows the patient well and is following the patient would actually make a clinical diagnosis of mild dementia. So you're in this phase that's called amnestic, for memory, mild cognitive impairment. By definition, There's no significant deficit in activities of daily living. So these are people who can kind of compensate for what's going on. The primary hallmark feature is that they have impairment in their episodic memory that is worse than you would expect for someone their age. And now I want to just tell you a little bit about episodic memory, because memory, for people that study the brain, has many different components to it. Episodic memory relies on this structure in the brain that is specialized for it, and it gives us a record of our experiences in life, going way back. But, tomorrow you'll remember this occasion, the events. There's a lot of that memory that can actually come back to mind. Same as months ago over the holidays. Many of us can remember events of the holidays. And this is a form of memory that just happens automatically, so easily. We don't even notice it until it fails. And when it fails, we've lost something that's very special to our own personal experience. And that store of episodic memory really constitutes a person's autobiography, what makes them the person they are, okay? And that is the first kind of memory, or the first earliest impairment in memory is in this episodic memory area. It's difficult because there's some effects of aging on it itself. But when that episodic memory failure becomes more consistent, not just an occasional burp, okay, in the system, and the people that know the person well see that progressing, that is one of the cardinal ways in which physicians can diagnose this condition of amnestic mild cognitive impairment. And then if you do this imaging for amyloid and the person has, now if they have that condition, there's no amyloid, it could be there's some other cause, metabolic, you look for, it's like a differential diagnosis. But the amyloid scan, if it's positive, would tell you, yes, there's increased risk that over time, again, could be a decade, could be more, you may arrive at that early diagnosis of dementia. And what we're trying to do is stop that from happening in this patient population that you can, with quite good certainty, identify, okay? And so what we're doing is that, and this is another thing that many of you may be familiar with, and this progression in the process of Alzheimer's disease from the earliest symptoms to greater and greater involvement of mental function is because Alzheimer's disease starts at ground zero. It starts in the memory system in the brain, the critical neurons and circuits that are necessary for making episodic memory. And over time, it spreads. And as it begins to involve more extensive systems that serve other functions in the brain, those functions start to fail too. So for example, a person through quite an extensive phase of actual diagnosis of dementia is comprehending language and using language. But at a more severe stage of dementia, their ability around language is also affected. I mean, this is the horror of the progression of dementia. So what we want to do is stop it in this area, in this phase that we can identify, and we will be using a drug that we have evaluated as one that will limit the spread of this disease in this early phase. And what Howard was saying is true. If we could take patients in this decade-long phase of the disease and keep that dementia diagnosis delayed, so this is Alzheimer's procrastination we're doing. If you could delay it for 3 years, you can decrease the prevalence of people and their families with dementia by 30%, which would be a very big public health. But ultimately, what we want to do is keep even that level of disability from happening, okay? So keep people with healthy mind aging and not becoming amnestic mild cognitive impairment, even that phase. And that's where the biomarker project is so important. I can't do that trial right now, although there's a reason to believe if this therapy works in mild cognitive impairment, it would work earlier. But I can't do that trial because I can't select those people. There's no biomarker that tells me these are the people at risk that should be treated now so that there is never any beginning phase of Alzheimer's disease. So I wanted to just thank you all, and those are my remarks, and I guess we get to go on.
Thank you, Dr. Phillip and Dr. Gallagher, for your overview of what's taking place in today's world and the research you're doing. We're going to just take a few questions right now and pose them to both doctors. And this question is directed to Howard, and I think as a result of the ratio of females versus males, 60% of females versus 40% in terms of getting Alzheimer's, I think we were all quite surprised to hear that. And I think we'd like to know what you're doing in terms of trying to dig in a little deeper as to explain why that is taking place.
Thanks, Tom. So there's good data, there's good information. There's good information that women are more at risk for Alzheimer's disease. And we don't know exactly why. Of course, women live longer, and Alzheimer's is a disease of aging, so there's simply more cases of women in old age getting it. But there also looks like women have greater risk. And so one of the sentinel events, obviously, in a woman's life that affects the brain, although we don't typically think about it, is the menopause. And at the time of the menopause, estrogens drop dramatically. And this causes osteoporosis, and if we treat women at that time, we can prevent osteoporosis. If you take that model and apply it to the brain, then there's a theory that we could delay or prevent Alzheimer's disease with estrogen replacement. Now, this has been around a while. I opened the first Alzheimer's clinic at Rockefeller University in 1981, and the first thing we did there was actually try treating elderly women with Alzheimer's disease with estrogen. And it looked like it was pretty promising. And this field now is 40 years later and still a very active field of investigation, but we don't have the answers yet. Let me just really briefly tell you two ways that ADDF is approaching this. The first one, again, is using that brain scan. So if the menopause is a sentinel event in increasing women's risk for Alzheimer's, then you would predict that at the time of the menopause, there would be a sudden or increased onset of this deposit of amyloid in the brain. And we can measure that with the brain scan. And some preliminary data that we've gotten out of UCLA shows that at the time of menopause, some women have increased amyloid deposition, and some of the women who are going through the menopause who take estrogen don't have that effect. So we're funding a study there to look at this more carefully to see if we can show that menopause is in fact a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. And then the second thing is treatments. And we worry about the risks of estrogen replacement for women, about the risk of breast cancer and so on. So what we want to do is develop drugs that mimic the effect of estrogen on the brain, but don't have the side effects. And as Leonard mentioned, with Robbie Brinton at the University of Arizona now, we're helping her to develop a drug called allopurinol, which is neuroprotective. It's the derivative of estrogen, a natural derivative, and we're very excited about the prospects of this drug as a safe sort of form of estrogen that could protect women from the risk of Alzheimer's disease.
Thank you, Howard. And this is Dr. Gallagher. Can you just explain a little bit more about the amnestic mild cognitive impairment that you touched on briefly?
Yeah, so, whoops, this is it. So I did try to kind of make the distinction about the area of memory that is involved and that is worsening. And it's interesting, my undergraduates, I teach courses at Johns Hopkins. As I said, there are many different kinds of memory manifestations. It was at dinner last night with some of the members here. I mentioned that tip of the tongue phenomenon, like, gee, I can't remember. That is not episodic memory, and that is normal aging. And a lot of my undergraduate students say it scares the hell out of their parents when that happens, and just, go home and forget about that one. But there is this episodic memory impairment that happens and gets worse over time, and the progression, a lot of clinical trials are going on, and we have enormous databases, just the natural history, observational studies, so we know how that progresses and what the biomarkers are doing in the brain and how the clinical features are coming out. So it takes about an 18-month or 2-year protocol to see enough progression within that phase to determine whether a drug is stopping the progression or slowing it.
Thank you. And Howard, this question is for you. Let's talk about genetics and what a role this plays with this terrible disease. In your thoughts?
So actually, genetic mutations are a rare cause of Alzheimer's, probably less than 1% of the cases around the world. And many of the genetic mutations that cause Alzheimer's are in people who are they get the Alzheimer's disease in their family. Everyone gets it in their 30s and 40s. So genetic mutations are rare in Alzheimer's disease. But there are genetic risk factors, as Leonard mentioned. The most common one is a protein called apolipoprotein E. And it's a cholesterol-carrying protein, interestingly. It has a lot of functions in the brain, particularly with regard to neuronal repair after injury, oxidative injury, just living on Earth type of injury, aging injury. And there's 3 forms of it, ApoE2, ApoE3, and ApoE4. This was discovered 25 years ago that people that have ApoE4, they have 2 4s, one from mom, one from dad, they're somewhere between 15 and 20 times have greater risk of getting Alzheimer's disease, and they're going to get it 10 years earlier. So, as scientists, we wanted to translate that biology into developing new drugs, and we tried many different ways as a field and at the ADDF to develop drugs to see if we could manipulate the ApoE4. And then there was an insight by a doctor at Cornell, Dr. Ron Crystal, who's the head of the Department of Genetics there, and he's been involved in genetic therapy for a number of diseases, and he came up with the idea, because ApoE2, which is another form and rather rare, only about 5% of the population has an ApoE2. But if you have an ApoE2 and an ApoE4, you have no risk, no increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. So it looks like ApoE2 can offset out ApoE4. 20% of the people in the population have ApoE4, 60% of people with Alzheimer's disease have ApoE4. So what we're doing with Dr. Crystal is we're taking the ApoE2 gene and we're putting it into what's called a non-infectious virus. So basically the virus is a payload for delivering the ApoE2 gene. And that virus with the ApoE2 gene is going to be injected into the brain of patients with Alzheimer's disease. And this has already been done in monkeys and in mice, and it's been shown to have good effect to prevent the amyloid deposition. And Dr. Crystal just got IND approval to take this into humans. The FDA has approved this technology for humans. There's even approved drugs that are viral vectors like this already on the market. So we're really excited that this really big risk factor for Alzheimer's, that's a genetic risk factor, that we will be able to solve that problem in the next 2 years. And we're going into clinical trials this year, and we're just really excited about what's going to happen in the future. If we can prevent ApoE4 study, we'll have a big jump out of Alzheimer's disease.
Thank you. And Dr. Gallagher, this question is for you. Based on what you're doing in your research, what other areas or targets are you exploring based on what you know now?
Right. So, the clinical trial that we're doing is to limit this transition or spread of the amyloid pathophysiology, and the particular way that it spreads follows the development of clinical symptoms and the death of neurons in the brain, okay? So I've been working with a colleague of mine at Hopkins. I think that actually he's supported by ADDF on a biomarker that is the underlying mechanism or contributes to this underlying mechanism that we are addressing with our therapy. And you can measure this in CSF, and he's working on a blood test that could allow you to measure it in blood samples. So my vision for what we are doing specifically is that there is get this ability to identify people in the earlier stages when they're just normal, healthy aging. You don't have to scan their brains, but you can find some measures that tell you that this underlying mechanism controlling the kind of activity that spreads the pathology is present, and that's an indication. It's what's called a companion diagnostic. It's an indication for a specific form of therapy. So that would be.
Thank you. And to just wrap this up, we're going to all go home. We're going to be with our families and friends. And would you tell each of us what you'd like us to, what are the takeaways for this afternoon? I mean, one or two things that people should know or should be more focused on as a result of this?
Well, I do think that there is hope. There's a huge amount of hope. It requires, there are a lot of dedicated people out there. It also does require money. And, you know, the government has been doing these bypass budgets, but the amount of money that is going into Alzheimer's is still minuscule compared to the amount of NIH money that goes into cardiovascular disease, to cancer research, and they're kind of coming up. And ADDF has played a really, really unique role because they have had this sort of vision, like this biomarker project is incredible. It's really looking towards the future in a very kind of visionary way. So that's my independent.
Thank you, Michela. Yeah, I just want to reiterate again, we have diagnostic tests, we have biomarkers, we have 120 drugs in clinical trials. We have positive results in clinical trials. I didn't talk about some of the other positive clinical trials that ADDF announced over the summer, and we're going to have another announcement pretty soon. And we know about prevention, which we really didn't talk much about today, but I can tell you that we can probably prevent at least 30% of the risk just through healthy lifestyles, and there's a lot of data. So, again, from my perspective, starting 40 years ago, we knew nothing about this disease. Today, we just know so much, and there's just so much progress. And the last thing I want to say is, most of the therapies have been on one target, which is amyloid. We're supporting anti-inflammatories for Alzheimer's because even Alzheimer described that there was inflammation in the brain, and that's driving progression of the disease. We're supporting neuronal insulin resistance and neuronal energy loss to try to improve the brain's energy utilization. We're supporting drugs that are going to attack the vascular system that goes wrong in Alzheimer's. And all I'm trying to say is that what you're going to see in the next 10 years or so, we're going to have some drugs, I think, to market in the next 3 to 5. But what you're going to see exploding now, and it's already happening, many different drug targets. So it's going to look like cancer. Cancer patients are on 3, 4, 5 drugs because you have to hit multiple systems in the cancer cell to kill it. And Alzheimer's is going to be similar. It's going to be what we call precision medicine. People are going to be on combination therapy, and we're going to be able to slow it down, and we're going to be able to prevent it. I've just never been more optimistic. You'd think after 40 years of slugging away at this, I'd be depressed, but I am depressed.
Well, on behalf of all of us who are here, we certainly want to thank you both, Howard and Michela, for what you've done, for keeping us better informed, bringing us up to date. And I know we all thank you for all the efforts that you're making to make it a better, healthier world as we move forward. So again, thank you for being part of this. It's now my privilege to introduce our ADDF board member and event co-chair, Nancy Goods. Nancy and co-chair's efforts have brought us all together as a community to learn more about this terrible disease. And we'll leave today with a better understanding of exactly what's taking place. Nancy, would you like to come up to the podium?
Thank you, Tom, for the warm introduction, and thank you all for being with us today and making this event another complete success. I have the wonderful job of introducing our honoree, Marci Gay Harden. You can sum up Marcia's public life in 3 words: actor, advocate, and author. As an actor, I'll put it simply, Marcia is fearless. She is never afraid to take on the most demanding roles and give it all in every one. Her courage is certainly clear in the roles that have brought her an Oscar and a Tony, and is clear in her most recent role in the Lifetime movie, Love You to Death. The movie came out in January and is based on the true story of a mother who torments her daughter by convincing the child she is deathly ill. Munchausen's by proxy. It was a fearless role, and that virtue, fearless, extends to Marcia's advocacy. Last June, she brought her star power and moral force to Congress, asking for greater investment in Alzheimer's research and care. Marcia testified before the Senate in support of a bill called BOLD to modernize the nation's infrastructure for Alzheimer's prevention and treatment. She began her testimony by honoring her mother, Beverly, who had spent 11 years in what Marcia called a resilient defiance against Alzheimer's. In an all-too-rare bipartisan action, the BOLD Alzheimer's bill was enacted into law on December 31st, 2018. It was a bittersweet victory for Marcia as Beverly died 2 weeks earlier. While Beverly is greatly missed, her memory lives on and beautifully through Marcia's book. Her first book, The Seasons of My Mother, a memoir of love and flowers, was published last May. It frames Beverly's legacy through her mutual love of flowers. I can only tell you that The Seasons of My Mother is one of the most moving books I have ever read. Like Marcia's, my mother died from the complications of Alzheimer's. In reading her book, I felt the instant connection, how deeply we miss our mothers, and how their lessons endure in defiance of the disease that ultimately claimed them. As Marcia puts it, her mother is still teaching, still yearning, and still loving. Here to teach and to encourage and to keep both hope and legacy alive, please welcome Marci Gay Harden.
Thank you. Meet my new publicist, Nancy. What a beautiful, beautiful introduction. Thank you. And thank you all for this beautiful honor. I am Marci Gay Harden, and I am a daughter of Alzheimer's. Before I talk about how much I'm grateful to be here, I just want to say that I've had the pleasure of spending a little bit of time with some of you last night, Jan and Nancy and Michela and Howard and some of you today. And don't take this the wrong way, but I'm reminded of a joke. So there's a man and a woman, and maybe a husband and wife, and they're asked if they have a favorite chair in the house. And the man says immediately, well, yes, of course I do. It's the armchair right there in the living room, and I sit there and I watch TV and I read the paper. And the woman thinks and she thinks and she thinks. She walks all over the house. What is her favorite chair? And then she comes back and she says, I don't think I've ever actually sat down. So I am in a room full of women, and to be fair, men, who I think have never actually sat down. And I want to thank you, Mr. Lauder, and Nancy, and Jan, and just everyone for all that you do, never sitting down in your pursuit of a cure. I have another little quick question for you. How many people in this room have lost a father to Alzheimer's? Just raise your hand and keep it up. How many people have lost a mother? How many people have lost a sibling? Keep your hands up, keep your hands up. An aunt, an uncle, a brother, a spouse, a grandparent. Okay, now put your hands down. How many people in this room are afraid of getting Alzheimer's yourselves? Okay, we all have something very much in common. So my mother's name is Beverly Ann Harden, and she passed away in December right before Christmas. And she would have loved it here. My mother would have loved the sunshine, the ocean, the sound of children's laughter bouncing against the waves. As Nancy mentioned, my mother was a Japanese flower arranger. She loved ikebana, and for those of you who don't know, it's based on the principles of a triangle, which all great art is based on a triangle. And the tallest flower is called Shin, which is heaven. Then the second one is called Soi, which is man, and the last one is Hikai, which is earth. Heaven, earth, and man. I mixed them up. So my mother would have loved the abundant greenery here. You may forget where you live. This is incredible. She would have loved the rhododendron. She would have loved the philodendron. She would have loved the jasmine, the lacy jasmine, the azalea cascading from the Spanish walls. It's just incredibly beautiful here, and my mother would have loved it. But mostly she would have loved all of you, and she would have loved the fact that you've come here, from what I understand, without even invites, apparently. The room has just gathered without invites to find a cure for Alzheimer's. So she would have loved that, being here, that you honor me for the possibility of hope on the horizon. Now, I walked around town yesterday and I was thinking a lot about the word hope. It's pondering a big question. How can we activate hope? And I'm always struck by the biblical phrase, faith, hope, and love, these three. The greatest of these is love. And I thought, why? Why is love the greatest of these three? Why isn't the greatest of these hope? Doesn't hope, it's our impulse, hope keeps us on track. It keeps us alive. It keeps us pointed in the right direction. Of course, it does. Faith, hope, and love. And it dawned on me that love, because of love of life really, which is simply the survival instinct, that we have faith. We have faith that there's something bigger than ourselves. We have faith that life is good, that there is something good. We have faith that we should keep on living life. And we have faith that people are good. You know, God is only one letter away from good, and devil is only one letter away from evil. Speaking of that, our faith can be shaken by the tragedies in the world, by wars, by cruelty, by pestilence, and by disease. I have never had my faith tested more than by the disease Alzheimer's. There's just nothing good about it. You can't make lemonade out of those lemons, and I feel like a liar when I try to. To see my mother erased, to witness her memory evaporate, and thus her validation of herself evaporate, it broke my heart. And my faith was further tested to learn about drug companies that were pulling out of Alzheimer's research because they weren't making a return on their investment. And that's where hope comes in. I learned about groups like all of you who refuse to give up, who refuse to be shut down, who come together to support brain and drug research. And I realized that hope doesn't have to be activated because hope is active. Hope is a verb. It's a call for action, which is why all of you are sitting here today. Now, one of my favorite people in the world, and you may know about him and his work, is Dr. Richard Leakey, the anthropologist. And he calls these acts of good that we do for each other, where we may not even know each other, he calls these acts of good something called reciprocal altruism. He says we don't necessarily save somebody in the wild because we're a good person or because of our religious beliefs. In the days of cavemen, we would save somebody from being attacked by a lion because that person might have the cure for cancer, or they might be your mate, or they might know about physics and understand how to make a fire. We would save those people because we understood that by saving them, and it sounds very lofty, but we were saving the human race. And we were making the human race better. And Dr. Leakey says that is in fact what he thinks made human beings, and made for the success of the human race. And he thinks that at the end of the day, it is what will save the human race. So the fact of all of us sitting in this room, I mean, like I said, it sounds very lofty to say, but we're here saving the human race. That is what we're doing. Now, I wrote this book for my mom for a lot of reasons. One of the first reasons I wrote it was because I wanted to get rid of the stigma of shame. Everyone, when my mom first came down with Alzheimer's, we were embarrassed to talk about it. We were embarrassed to, it seemed like we were labeling her as something unapproachable. I wrote it because I wanted to reach out to caregivers and say that the things that we feel as caregivers are normal. Again, things that we often didn't talk about. Frustration, impatience, fear, anger. I was so impatient with my mother at times before I understood what she had. The financial burden. All those things are really, really real. And we are together in trying to overcome those frustrations of being a caregiver. But I also wrote the book because I didn't want my mother's legacy to be Alzheimer's. I wanted my mother's legacy to be the beauty of all that she is. Memory is our North Star. It tells us where we are in the world and who we are in the world. Michela calls memory our biography. My mom forgot her biography. And so I would sit and I would tell her over and over and over again who she was. I would tell her that she'd had 5 kids and that she was a great mother. She hadn't remembered that. I would tell her that she traveled all over the world. She didn't remember that. And she was always astonished anew. Oh my, how wonderful. And I would say, how does it feel to not remember these things? And she would say, well, Marcia Gay, people tell me that they're things I did, so I guess it's true, and I'm glad people remember them. But I could see her lift up just a little bit when I would tell her how great she was. She would also say to me one day, I came into the room, and she said, I don't know who you are, but there's something important about you that I remember. And then she said, something about you makes me happy. I know that. And I thought, yes, that's great, Mom, if you remember that about me. So I told her, once during FaceTiming, I'd called my mother, because I didn't want to miss anything. I wanted to get everything in the book. So I'm FaceTiming her, and I said, Mom, anything you're thinking about, sex, or flowers, or children, or your life, whatever you're thinking about, I want you to tell me. And she started to say something, and then she stopped, and she couldn't speak very well at this time. She really could barely make complete sentences. And she said, God. And I said, you're thinking about God. What are you thinking about God? And she said, love. Love. It happens to everybody. The better the thoughts, the better the thinking. And that was my mother's way of sort of talking about the power of positive thinking and reminding me that love is omnipresent, it transcends place and time, and even without memory, love exists. We all have hope. We have hope to live a full life, to age with dignity. Together we're called to action, to honor hope on the horizon, and in doing so, I really believe we honor and activate the hope within ourselves. And if anybody's standing before the lion right now and needs to be saved, it is Dr. Michela and Howard. Honestly, I believe that. Research needs to be saved. We cannot let it bypass us. Not just the Alzheimer's victim, but the doctors who are doing the research. So that's really what our call to action is, to save research, to save research from the lion. The work they're doing has to be funded, backed, and supported in whatever way we can. The work ensures that there is a cure on the horizon. Their work ensures we will remember ourselves. And their work ensures that our children will not have to be our caretakers, but will instead celebrate the end of this disease. I want to leave you finally with a little gift from my mom. I'd called her, again, terrified to end sort of the legacy of her life. And what if I'd missed something? And I said, what else, Mom? What else do you want people to know about you? What is the legacy my mother imagines, I wonder? She slowly responds, carefully forming each word. Well, what's important that people know about me is my children, my travel, and flowers. And I want to always be helping my children, and I want to always be helping people. So it is no surprise, it makes perfect sense to me, that the last gift from my mother 2 months ago was to donate her brain to Alzheimer's research. That's reciprocal altruism. That's why we're here. That is what science research is, to help people, some we don't even know, and thus ensure and enhance the survival of the human race. Shin Soy Hikai, heaven, earth, and man. Thank you for being here today.
Okay, well, thank you, Marcia, again, for giving us the reason to hope on behalf of ADDF and all those who are here today. We commend you for speaking out and sharing your story, and congratulate you for receiving the ADDF Hope on the Horizon Award. Now, as they get ready to clear the tables and to serve you dessert and coffee, one of the other things that I do in this town, and it's not, I don't look for these opportunities, I'm going to tell you right now. I raised money for a bus last night, okay, for an organization called Darpsters, and they transport animals from down in Florida to New England. And they had a card that they were handing out, and I said, people are going to fill these cards out. Well, I hope you do this afternoon. But we weren't sure about the crowd last night, so I said, what do you need? What? At the end of the day, he said, we want to raise enough money to buy an $85,000 bus. And I said, let's go. So we bought the bus last night for the generosity of so many people. And as you heard Dr. Gallagher tell us today, one of the things that we are continuing to be faced with is funding. And so we're not getting all the dollars that we should be getting based on the disease and the number of people that it affects in our country. So this part of the program, having an auction, does make a big difference. It does change what we are able to put towards the efforts of Howard and all your colleagues and the researchers that are just doing an absolutely spectacular job in trying to eradicate this disease. So we only have 2 auction items this afternoon, and one are these beautiful earrings that should be shown on the board here behind me. There you go. They are beautifully designed by Lorenz Balmer. A pendant donated by him, they're worth $33,000. He's an atypical and a very innovative creative who has designed these elegant pair of earrings made with white diamonds, pearls, sapphires, and white gold. These earrings are a centerpiece by themselves. Between night and day, you'll look smashing in it. And I hope that for the gentlemen that are here in this room, that this is a perfect opportunity to tell your spouse how much you love them once again. If there's a birthday coming, an anniversary, this is the opportunity. You don't have to go down to Worth Avenue. You can do it right here. And we know it's going to support these great efforts of ADDF. So for $33,000 pair of earrings, can we see a raised hand? And let's open it up this afternoon at $5,000. So we have $5,000 for these beautiful earrings, $5,000. Do we have someone that would like to raise their hand? Thank you very much. Back left side of the room, $5,000. Let's go to $6,000. We have 5. Let's make it $6,000. Thank you. In the center of the room, it's against you, sir. We're looking for $7,000. $6,000 right here in the center. Against you, we're looking for $7,000. $7,000, we have $6,000, let's make it $7,000. We're looking for $7,000, thank you very much. $7,000 against you, both back in the room. $8,000, thank you, we're looking for 9. We have 8, we're looking for $9,000. Sir, it's against you. We have $9,000, thank you very much. $8,000, we're looking for $9,000. It's against you, we're looking for $9,000. We're looking for $9,000, we have $8,000, thank you very much. We're looking for $9,000. $9,000 for these beautiful earrings. $9,000, we have 8, we're looking for $9,000. We have $8,000 on the floor. We're looking for $9,000. $9,000. Okay, let's make it $10,000. Okay, sir, it's against you. We're looking for $10,000. $10,000 for these beautiful earrings. $10,000. We have $9,000. We have $9,000. We're looking for 10. We're looking for 10. It's against you, sir. We have $9,000. We're looking for $10,000. We'll have 9. We're looking for $10,000. $10,000. We're going to call it. We'll make it once. $10,000. Thank you very much. Okay, right here in the front of the room, $10,000. Sir, it's against you. Okay, we have $10,000. We're looking for $11,000. It's against you. We're looking for $11,000. We have 10. Thank you very much. We're looking for $11,000. We have 10. We're looking for $11,000. It's here in the center of the room. We're looking for $11,000. We have 10. Thank you very much. We have $10,000. We have $10,000 once. And we have $10,000 twice. And aren't you a great man if you buy these for your loved one? Thank you. Okay, and the second auction item this afternoon is from our great friends, Fleet Miami, and they have once again given us the use of this fabulous yacht. It's to experience luxury and excitement down in Miami. It's completely a beautiful boat, an 87-foot Warren yacht. The cruise will include 3 crew members, fuel, soft drinks, and snacks, and is to be enjoyed with up to 12 people. So this is to get in the car, go down to Miami, and to spend a wonderful spring afternoon on this fabulous-looking boat. Let's open up this afternoon. It's valued at $6,000, let's open up this afternoon at $2,500. $2,500, thank you very much. We have 25, let's make it 3,000, 3,000, we'll go to $4,000. We have 3, let's make it 4,000, thank you very much. Let's go to $5,000. We have 4, let's make it $5,000. 5, thank you very much. We're looking for 6. We have 5, 6,000, thank you. We're looking for 7. We have 6, thank you. We're looking for $7,000. We have 6, we have 6 in the, $7,000, okay. Again, right here, this woman at this table here in the center, $7,000 starts against you. We have $7,000, we're looking for 8. We have 7, thank you very much. We're looking for $8,000. We have 7, we're making $8,000. We have $7,000, thank you, $8,000, thank you very much. Okay, $8,000, we're looking for $9,000. We have 8, we're looking for $9,000. We have 8, we're looking for $9,000. We're looking for $9,000. We have 8, $9,000, thank you very much. Friends battling against each other over here. Keep going. We're looking for $10,000. We have 9,000. Let's make it $10,000. $10,000. We have 9. Thank you very much. We're looking for $10,000. I love competition between friends. Okay, we have 10. Let's go make it 11. We have 10. Thank you very much. We're looking for $11,000. We have $10,000. We have $10,000 once. Let's see if we can have a broken arm by the end of this little battle here. We have $10,000 once, and we have $10,000 twice. Sold to you, and I hope you invite her on that cruise. Again, I want to thank you all. I do hope that you were not successful in the bidding this afternoon. The cards are on the table, and you can make a big difference and continue the efforts of Howard and all the colleagues that he has working with him in clinics, hospital research centers all across the United States by filling out a card and handing it to one of the many volunteers that are circling around this room. I'm very pleased to let you know that as a result of today's luncheon, that we have raised over $300,000, and we want to thank, once again, Jan and Nancy for your efforts. As we all know, this town is full of events and things that we can do 7 days a week, lunch and dinner. But I know that on behalf of Jan and Nancy, they thank you very much for being part of a very special day here in Palm Beach. Thank you very much. And again, to Leonard and to Judy,